Living with a narcissistic woman is like working in a factory designed to manufacture one product: your complete and total self-doubt. Every day, every interaction, every conversation becomes another assembly line producing the same devastating question. Am I the problem here? This isn't accidental confusion. This isn't natural relationship difficulty. This is systematic psychological manipulation designed to make you question your own sanity, your own judgment, your own worth as a human being. She's not just disagreeing with you, she's rewriting reality itself to make you the villain in every story. You wake up walking on eggshells, trying to predict what will set her off today. You go to sleep analysing every word you said, every decision you made, every way you might have failed to meet her expectations. The constant mental accounting of potential mistakes becomes so exhausting that you start to believe the only way to have peace is to admit that everything is your fault. But here's what makes this factory so efficient. She never has to explicitly tell you that you're the problem. The system is designed so that you reach that conclusion yourself. When every conversation ends with you apologizing, when every conflict gets resolved by you changing your behavior, when every issue in the relationship gets traced back to something you did wrong, your brain starts to accept a devastating truth. You must be the source of all these problems. The beauty of this manipulation is that it creates willing participants in their own destruction. You become so conditioned to accept blame that you start taking responsibility for things that have nothing to do with you. Her bad mood at work must be something you did at home. Her conflict with her sister, probably because you didn't support her properly. Her financial stress, obviously your fault for not making more money or not managing money better. This self-doubt factory operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, producing a man who can run companies, lead teams, and solve complex problems everywhere except in his own home, where he's been convinced that his judgment is fundamentally flawed and his perspective is inherently wrong. In a healthy marriage, you're teammates facing life's challenges together. With a narcissistic woman, you're opponents in a competition where she holds all the advantages and writes all the rules. She's not your partner. She's conducting opposition research to find new ways to undermine your position. This isn't disagreement between equals. This isn't two people with different perspectives working toward common goals. This is one person systematically positioning herself against everything you think, want, or believe, not because she disagrees with the specifics, but because agreeing with you would mean acknowledging that you might be right about something. The opposition is automatic and reflexive. If you suggest a restaurant, she'll find problems with it. If you propose a vacation destination, she'll list all the reasons it won't work. If you have an opinion about your children's education, she'll take the opposite position almost before you finish speaking. The content doesn't matter. What matters is that you don't get to be right. This creates what I call the perpetual adversary dynamic, where you can never relax into being accepted, supported, or validated by the person who's supposed to love you most. Every idea you have must be defended. Every preference you express must be justified. Every decision you make must survive cross-examination. The most insidious part of this dynamic is how it destroys your confidence in your own judgment. When the person closest to you consistently opposes your thoughts and decisions, you start to believe that maybe your thinking really is flawed. Maybe your ideas really are bad. Maybe your instincts really can't be trusted. But the opposition isn't about your ideas being wrong. It's about maintaining a power structure where she holds the position of judgment and you occupy the position of being judged. She needs you to be wrong so she can be right. She needs you to be confused so she can be certain. She needs you to be weak so she can feel strong. Physical and emotional intimacy, which should be the foundation of your marriage, becomes a weapon system designed to control your behavior and punish your independence. What started as connection becomes manipulation. What began as love becomes leverage. This weaponization follows a predictable pattern. In the beginning, she uses intimacy to establish control, making physical connection contingent on your compliance with her wishes, your agreement with her opinions, your submission to her preferences. You learn that being close to her requires being controlled by her. Then comes the withdrawal phase, where intimacy disappears entirely, leaving you confused, hurt, and desperate to understand what you did wrong. She doesn't explain the withdrawal, she just removes all physical affection, emotional warmth, and sexual connection, letting you draw your own conclusions about why you're being punished. The guilt induction follows naturally. When you express frustration about the lack of intimacy, she makes you feel guilty for having normal human needs. You become the problem for wanting physical connection with your wife. You become selfish for expecting emotional warmth from your partner. You become demanding for thinking that marriage should include regular physical affection. This creates what psychologists call approach avoidance conflict, where you simultaneously crave and fear intimacy with your own wife. You want connection, but you know that wanting it will be used against you. You need affection, but you've learned that needing it makes you weak and selfish in her eyes. The result is complete isolation within your own marriage. You can't get intimacy when you want it, and you can't want intimacy without being made to feel guilty about it. You become emotionally and physically starved while living with someone who's supposed to be your closest companion. The most devastating part is how this isolation extends beyond the marriage itself. You can't discuss these issues with friends without feeling embarrassed. You can't seek support from family without seeming like you're complaining about normal marriage challenges. You become completely alone with problems that you're not even sure you're allowed to have. A narcissistic woman understands that your friends and family represent a threat to her control because they might help you recognize that your treatment isn't normal, acceptable, or healthy. So she systematically eliminates your support system through a process that seems reasonable on the surface, but is devastatingly effective in practice. The elimination starts with seemingly valid concerns about specific friends. He drinks too much. He's a bad influence. He doesn't respect your marriage. She's too focused on partying. She's jealous of your relationship. For each friend, she develops a customized argument for why that person is problematic for your life. But here's the pattern you don't notice until it's too late. Every friend is problematic for different reasons, but every friend needs to go. The party animal is bad because he encourages irresponsible behavior. The successful friend is bad because he makes you feel inadequate. The married friend is bad because he gives you unrealistic expectations. The single friend is bad because he doesn't understand marriage. Meanwhile, her friends are wonderful, supportive, and essential to her well-being. When you express concern about her friends, maybe they encourage her to complain about you. Maybe they create drama in your relationship. Maybe they take up time you'd like to spend together. You're being controlling, insecure, and unreasonable. This creates a social double standard where she maintains full access to outside support and validation, while you become increasingly isolated from anyone who might provide perspective on your situation. Your world shrinks until she becomes your primary source of social interaction, emotional feedback, and reality testing. The isolation serves multiple functions in the control system. It prevents you from getting outside perspective that might help you recognize manipulation. It eliminates allies who might support you in conflicts. It makes you emotionally dependent on her approval since you have fewer sources of validation. It reduces your confidence in your own judgment since you have fewer people to check your perceptions against. Most importantly, it ensures that when you do start to question whether your treatment is acceptable, you have nowhere to go for support, advice, or simply someone to listen to your concerns without judgment. No matter what you do, how hard you try, or how much you achieve, it's never enough. Not just not quite enough, or good effort but could be better. Never enough. Period. This isn't about high standards or pushing you to be your best self. This is about maintaining a system where satisfaction is permanently out of reach. The dissatisfaction engine operates on multiple levels simultaneously. At work, no amount of success translates to pride in your accomplishments. Promotion? You should have gotten it sooner. Raise? Should have been bigger. Recognition? About time they noticed what she's been telling them all along. At home? No level of contribution gets acknowledged. You handle the dishes, but you didn't clean the counter properly. You manage the yard, but you didn't trim the edges perfectly. You fix something around the house, but you took too long to do it, or didn't do it exactly the way she would have done it. With the children, no amount of involvement makes you a good father. You're either too strict or too permissive, too involved or too distant, too focused on fun or too serious about discipline. The specific criticism doesn't matter. What matters is that your parenting is always somehow inadequate. This systematic dissatisfaction serves a crucial function in the control system. It ensures that you never feel secure enough in your contributions to stop trying harder. You can never relax, never feel proud of your efforts, never believe that you've done enough to earn peace, appreciation, or simple acknowledgement. The engine is designed to keep you in a permanent state of trying to prove your worth, trying to earn her approval, trying to finally do something right enough to receive the validation that never comes. You become a hamster on a wheel, running faster and faster toward a destination that keeps moving further away. But here's the cruelest part. Occasionally, when you're working hardest to improve or achieve something significant, she might temporarily pause the criticism. Not because you've actually satisfied her, but because the temporary positive reinforcement will motivate you to work even harder. The moment your effort decreases or your attention shifts elsewhere, the dissatisfaction engine roars back to life. If you're starting to recognize these patterns in your own marriage and want to understand more about how psychological manipulation operates in relationships, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. The dynamics I'm explaining today represent years of studying how narcissistic abuse manifests differently in women versus men, and there's much more depth to explore in upcoming videos about toxic relationship patterns and recovery strategies. In the narcissistic woman's mind, you're not just responsible for current problems, you're somehow accountable for every negative experience she's ever had, regardless of when they occurred or whether you were even present in her life. You become a universal scapegoat for decades of accumulated grievances, disappointments, and traumas. This blame archive operates like a psychological filing system where every bad thing that ever happened to her gets categorized under your name. Her father was absent. That's somehow connected to your inability to be emotionally available. Her ex-boyfriend cheated. That explains why she can't trust you despite your complete faithfulness. Her mother was critical. That's why she needs to protect herself from your imagined attacks. The archive creates what I call temporal blame shifting, where events that preceded your relationship become your responsibility through creative psychological accounting. She needed to move cities for a job she hated. Your fault for not supporting her career better. She made poor financial decisions in college. Your fault for not helping her manage money properly now. This system allows her to justify present-day punishment for past-day problems that had nothing to do with you. She can treat you poorly today because she needs to get back at men in general for what other men did to her previously. She can withhold affection now because she's still angry about how someone else treated her years ago. The most sophisticated version of this blame archive involves creating fictional narratives where you become responsible for problems that didn't actually happen the way she remembers them. Her version of events gets revised over time to make you the villain in stories where you were either the hero or completely absent. For example, she might claim you never supported her during a crisis where you actually dropped everything to help her. She might insist you weren't there for her during a period when you sacrificed your own needs to be available. She might accuse you of being selfish during times when you were actually being selfless. These revised histories become truth in her mind, and your protests or attempts to provide alternative versions of events get dismissed as gaslighting, defensiveness, or inability to take responsibility for your actions. You end up being punished for crimes you didn't commit based on evidence that doesn't exist. Money becomes a tool of psychological control rather than a resource to be managed together for mutual benefit. Even when you're the primary breadwinner, she controls every aspect of how money gets spent, saved, and allocated, turning you into an employee in your own financial life. The control matrix operates through several mechanisms simultaneously. First, she establishes herself as the financial decision-maker regardless of who earns the money. Every purchase must be approved, every expense must be justified, every financial choice must meet her criteria for acceptability. Second, she creates different rules for different people. Her spending is investment, necessity, or well-deserved reward. Your spending is waste, selfishness, or poor judgment. She can buy clothes because she needs them for work. You can't buy clothes because the ones you have are perfectly fine. She can spend money on her friends because relationships are important. You can't spend money on your friends because it's frivolous. Third, she establishes herself as the authority on what constitutes reasonable spending, regardless of her actual knowledge about finances, budgeting, or household economics. Your financial expertise, professional experience, or mathematical ability becomes irrelevant when she's decided that something costs too much or isn't necessary. The matrix creates what economists call learned helplessness about money management. You stop making financial decisions because every decision gets criticized, overruled, or used as evidence of your poor judgment. You start asking permission for purchases you should be able to make independently as a grown adult with your own income. This financial control extends beyond money into autonomy itself. When you can't make basic economic choices, You can't feel like an equal partner in your own marriage. When you have to justify every expense like a child asking parents for allowance, you lose adult agency in your own life. The control matrix also serves as a humiliation system, where your competence gets questioned in the area where men are traditionally expected to be responsible. You might be successful professionally, but at home, you can't be trusted to buy groceries without supervision or approval. Every problem she creates, every mistake she makes, every negative consequence of her decisions somehow becomes your fault through a sophisticated system of blame redistribution that would impress professional politicians. She doesn't just avoid responsibility, she transfers it to you so completely that you end up apologizing for things she did wrong. The redistribution system operates through several psychological mechanisms. First, she reframes her actions as reactions to your behavior. She didn't choose to be cruel, you made her cruel by being insensitive. She didn't decide to overspend, you drove her to overspend by being controlling about money. She didn't elect to be distant, you forced her to be distant by being too needy. Second, she establishes herself as the victim of your poor choices, even when your choices were specifically designed to accommodate her preferences. You planned a vacation to a place she said she wanted to go, but when it doesn't meet her expectations, you should have known better than to trust her stated preferences. You cooked dinner exactly the way she requested, but when she doesn't like it, you should have realized she didn't really mean what she said. Third, she creates elaborate causal chains that connect your minor actions to her major reactions, in ways that seem logical on the surface, but are completely disproportionate in reality. You came home 15 minutes late, which meant you don't respect her time, which means you don't respect her, which justifies her being angry for 3 days and bringing up every other time you've ever been late in the past 5 years. The system is so effective that you start automatically accepting blame for things that make no logical sense. When she's in a bad mood, you immediately start thinking about what you might have done to cause it. When something goes wrong in her life, you reflexively consider how you might be responsible. When she's unhappy about anything, you assume you must have failed her somehow. This creates what psychologists call hypervigilance about responsibility, where you become obsessed with monitoring your own behavior for potential mistakes that might hurt her, disappoint her, or give her reasons to be upset with you. The most insidious part of this system is how it trains you to gaslight yourself. You know logically that you didn't cause all these problems, but the constant blame redistribution makes you doubt your own perceptions and accept responsibility for things that weren't your fault. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of living with a narcissistic woman is the gradual realization that there's nothing behind her eyes. Not anger, not sadness, not even hatred, just emptiness. You're married to someone who looks human, but lacks the essential emotional components that make relationships possible. This void manifests in her complete inability to feel genuine remorse when she hurts you. Not defensive justification of her actions, not anger at being called out, not even fake apologies designed to manipulate you. Just nothing. She can say or do things that devastate you and feel absolutely no emotional consequence for the pain she's caused. The void also appears in her inability to understand why you have emotional reactions to anything. When you're hurt by her behavior, she responds with genuine confusion about why you would feel hurt. When you're excited about something, she can't access any enthusiasm or shared joy. When you're worried about something, she has no capacity for comfort or support. Having conversations with someone who lacks emotional depth is like talking to a sophisticated mirror that reflects your words back without understanding their meaning. She can repeat the right phrases, make the appropriate responses, and even simulate caring, but there's no genuine emotional connection happening. This emotional absence creates profound isolation, even when you're physically together. You can be in the same room, having a conversation, sharing your day, and feel completely alone because there's no one actually receiving what you're sharing. Your words disappear into a void where emotions go to die. The void also explains why nothing you do to improve the relationship makes any lasting difference. She can't appreciate your efforts because appreciation requires emotional depth. She can't reciprocate your love because reciprocation requires emotional availability. She can't change her behavior because change requires emotional motivation. Living with this void changes you in ways that are difficult to reverse. You stop sharing excitement because it never gets reflected back. You stop expressing hurt because it never gets acknowledged. You stop trying to connect emotionally because connection is impossible with someone who doesn't have emotions to connect with. The ultimate weapon in her psychological arsenal is the constant threat of leaving, not as a genuine intention to end the marriage, but as a tool to maintain control through fear of abandonment. These threats become so routine that you develop a conditioned response of anxiety and submission whenever she mentions divorce. The threat system operates on the principle that men fear abandonment more than they fear conflict, so the possibility of her leaving becomes more powerful than any argument she could make. Instead of convincing you that she's right, she just has to convince you that being wrong means being alone. These threats come in waves, usually during periods when you're asserting independence, questioning her behaviour, or showing signs of developing backbone. The moment you start acting like an equal partner instead of a subordinate, she reminds you that she has the power to destroy your life by leaving. The threats aren't random emotional outbursts, they're calculated psychological warfare designed to erode your sense of security and train you to avoid any behaviour that might trigger her displeasure. You learn to anticipate these threats and modify your behaviour to prevent them, giving her veto power over your entire personality. Over time, the threats become normalised to the point where you don't even consciously register them as threats anymore. Maybe I should just leave becomes background noise in your marriage, but your nervous system still responds with stress, anxiety, and immediate efforts to appease her and restore stability. The system is particularly effective because it exploits men's tendency to want to fix problems rather than end relationships. Every threat becomes a challenge for you to solve by being better, trying harder, or changing more completely. You never consider that the threats themselves are the problem that needs to be addressed. The abandonment threat system also prevents you from setting boundaries or asserting your own needs, because any pushback on your part gets met with the ultimate pushback on her part, the suggestion that maybe you'd both be better off apart. All of these psychological manipulation tactics create what experts call trauma bonding, a psychological attachment that forms when someone alternates between abuse and intermittent positive reinforcement. This isn't love, but it feels stronger than love because it's rooted in survival psychology rather than healthy attachment. The trauma bond explains why you can't just leave despite recognizing that your marriage is destroying your mental health, your self-esteem, and your overall well-being. Your nervous system has become addicted to the cycle of tension, conflict, resolution, and temporary peace that defines your relationship. The bond is strengthened by the intermittent reinforcement schedule she employs, occasional moments of kindness, rare expressions of appreciation, brief periods of normal behaviour that give you hope that the real her is still accessible. These positive moments become psychologically precious because they're so rare. Your brain interprets the occasional relief from psychological abuse as evidence that the relationship can work, that she can change, that you just need to try harder or be better to access the loving partner you know exists somewhere inside her. The trauma bond also explains why advice from friends and family feels irrelevant or impossible to follow. They see your situation clearly and wonder why you don't just leave, but they don't understand that you're not making decisions based on logic anymore. You're responding to deep psychological programming that equates leaving with death. Breaking trauma bonds requires professional help because the psychological mechanisms involved operate below the level of conscious decision-making. You can understand intellectually that your marriage is unhealthy, while being completely unable to take steps to protect yourself from ongoing psychological damage. Understanding that you're married to a narcissistic woman is the first step toward reclaiming your sanity, but it's only the first step. Recovery from this kind of psychological abuse requires systematic effort to rebuild your sense of reality, restore your confidence in your own judgment, and develop the skills necessary to protect yourself from ongoing manipulation. The most important thing to understand is that none of this is your fault. You didn't create this situation, you didn't deserve this treatment, and you can't fix her through better behaviour on your part. Narcissistic abuse is a deliberate system of control that would damage anyone subjected to it consistently over time. Recovery starts with rebuilding your connection to reality through external validation of your experiences. This means talking to therapists, counsellors, or other professionals who understand narcissistic abuse and can help you distinguish between normal relationship problems and systematic psychological manipulation. It also means reconnecting with friends and family members who can provide perspective on your situation and remind you of who you were before this relationship consumed your identity. The isolation that narcissistic abuse creates needs to be actively counteracted through deliberate relationship, building with people who support your well-being. Most importantly, Recovery means learning to trust your own perceptions again instead of constantly second-guessing your judgment, your memory, and your right to have needs, boundaries, and expectations in your marriage. If this analysis has helped you recognize patterns in your own marriage that you've been struggling to understand, subscribe to this channel for more insights into the psychology of narcissistic abuse and recovery strategies. Hit that notification bell because understanding these dynamics could be the first step toward reclaiming your life and your sanity. Share this video with any man who might be suffering in silence, thinking that his marriage problems are normal or that he's somehow responsible for the psychological warfare he's experiencing. The goal isn't to demonize women or suggest that all relationship problems involve narcissistic abuse. The goal is to help men recognize when they're experiencing systematic psychological manipulation disguised as marriage, and to understand that they deserve better than a relationship that requires them to disappear in order to function. You're not the problem. You're not responsible for her emotional state, her happiness, or her behavior toward you. You deserve to be treated with respect, kindness, and basic human dignity by the person who promised to love you for better or worse. Recovery is possible, but it requires recognizing that some relationships are so toxic that the only winning move is not to play. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and everyone involved is to refuse to participate in a system designed to destroy your soul one small compromise at a time.